Welcome back. Monte and Wolf Show is here. We are not having network issues, so we are not going to have to pause this show. Well, we might have network issues later, but as it stands right now, we are not going to have to pause this show for potentially 6 hours, Wolf. I
Yeah,
know you were, and then reschedule it.
exactly. We are planning on continuing with the show, and it is going to be about its normal length, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about. But we will not be pausing, nor will we then returning briefly and then pausing again for an extended period of time and then returning briefly and then pausing again. Even though the show is really over, even though it's really done, and we kind of like we're really wrapping up, but like we have to kind of like hold on a second and then we'll
Yeah.
come back in a few hours and then you'll finish your closing.
That's right. And certainly not, we'll get up to the point where we'll discuss how KT is obviously fraudulent. And then you will pause the stream for 6 hours while losing the argument. And then you'll lose in the final 2 minutes after we come back, right?
Yeah.
Because we gotta hold just for that ultimate moment at the end. Look, I, I saw a bunch of rumors flying around social media about this that maybe it was a DDoS on the actual LCK studio because apparently some of the major streamers and professional players have been repeatedly DDoSed while playing solo queue. Wolf, have you seen anything about the players being DDoSed?
So I have definitely heard reports of players and streamers getting DDoSed and even like professional players who are streaming, right? On their just like free days and stuff, getting DDoSed. And as far as I know, nobody really knows who's behind that. It might be a group of people. I'm not a person who really fully is like super technologically understanding how DDoSes work and how to protect against DDoS and all that stuff. Like I've never been DDoSed myself. And usually in esports there are a lot of like protections against that. And streamers usually have pretty good protections against that. But I've heard that people are getting, disconnected from their League of Legends games, not just like their internet's getting DDoSed at their house and they're, losing their connection or ability to stream. Um and even though LCK is on an internal network, I suppose it is possible someone could have um, gotten some information from someone and has been able to attack that. It's very wild that this is all happening, and um, it really does make you wonder about like, is this a vulnerability that exists in esports, or is this just something got leaked internally, or something? Who knows? If it is what happened, um, why the like protection wasn't there, or if there's like a somehow a new exploit that's been found that could affect other leagues as well. So scary times. And I hope that whatever it is resolved before the matches that are replayed, and then obviously the matches that are going to be played next week. Otherwise, it is going to be a crazy circumstance where we never know really what's up and what's down. Initially, it looked like a lot of people were reporting that Lol Park had internet issues in general when the first like pause happened, when the first ping issues were being described. Everyone was saying their internet was slow at Lol Park itself. Um, but the stream, for example, was running fine. The broadcast was going through okay. So yeah, it was very puzzling, and we never got an official statement on what the network issues were. So I don't know if
Look,
we
and
will.
we're not, especially if it's going to be DDoS, because like they don't want to encourage other people to potentially do this, right? So it's understandable, I think, why Riot, if that's what it was, would not be the ones willing to discuss this, because otherwise people might try and find that same exploit or figure out what worked. And as you say, it could potentially affect other leagues. Although it is, I think, a bit surprising. Like, look, i- i- we don't know exactly what the issue is, but, there has to be some internet connectivity from the studio because you have to not only be able to play the games, but be able to broadcast the games as well.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it wasn't just the broadcast that was being affected. It was actually players' ability to play the game with a reasonable amount of ping, right? Um, so I'm not sure exactly how they can fix this issue when you do consistently at least have to have that connectivity to the broadcast, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's possible to fully isolate the player PCs if they need to pull the feeds in order to broadcast it, right? because they have to have the observers in the game, and then the observers are the ones that are going out to the broadcast. So how you create layers of security on that, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
But it does seem difficult.
I also think that the matches that are rescheduled, if they're going to be played very soon, like will probably may not be broadcasted at all, or this is just theory crafting, or may actually be like recorded, not live, and then a VOD is posted just so that
Yeah.
the vulnerability isn't there. If that is in fact what happened, right? So I'd imagine you guys will get an update on it pretty soon, about what's going to happen on that, but obviously,
Yeah,
Riot has
and
to decide very carefully.
And for those of you who don't know, so typically, I mean, my experience in watching this match, so it was the DRX versus Dplus match yesterday. It was a 3-game match, and Dplus did end up winning in the end. But essentially, the delays were absolutely enormous. So this match started at 3 p.m. local time in Korea, and then there were pauses. And literally by like 9 p.m., the game was still going on because there had been 5 or 6 hours basically of pause times within this series. And it got so late that they ended up canceling or moving the Kwangdong Brion second matchup of the evening, which still hasn't been played, which was supposed to be played after that series. And as Wolf says, we don't know if they're going to do it live or just kind of play it in isolation and then release the VOD later, so as not to disrupt scheduling. So that's still up in the air, but they do have to reschedule that match. And I think, to be fair, like that was the right call from
Yeah,
the LCK. We've been critical of them before, but keeping the players there who had already been waiting 6 hours even longer and potentially for this issue to continue manifesting was not good. So I think it was absolutely the right call to postpone the matches and then figure out a time to play them later.
there was recently in the Valorant League in Korea, the VCT Pacific League, a very long pause that went on for like 7 hours as well. With I don't know exactly how long, but it seemed like it was like 7 hours long, where the players were reporting problems with their headsets, and it was like a hardware problem, and they just couldn't play the game. And they like went to overtime, and they couldn't play it out. And then finally they were able to resolve it and finish it, but they also postponed the remaining matches that day. And this is actually like, I know this sounds pretty like, oh, it's no brainer, it's the right choice, but for Korean esports historically, we fucking go. Like we actually just
Yeah.
do it until 4 a.m. Like that's in Korean esports, historically speaking, whether it's been StarCraft or any of this stuff, you just go until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. That's Korean culture. That's like we're not actually going. People are not going to get paid twice to do this. We're actually just going to go, and then no, it just is what it is. It be what it be. The fans, if you want to go home, you can go home. Whatever is kind of usually how it goes. But to see historically 2 times recently where games were postponed, I think is really from a Korean esports perspective quite unusual. But I think absolutely a move in the right direction that finally, Riot and the LCK are deciding like, hey, competitive integrity, players first. I'm sorry to the fans, you get your refunds. I know this really sucks for everyone, but I'm actually going to give the players the right amount of like time to prep and sleep and come back and play this match at the best condition rather than just hard forcing it for the sake of the show or for the sake of saving money or anything like that. So I absolutely think it's the right call. I'm glad it happened. It recently twice happened both times I really did not expect that it was going to be postponed, but both times I was wrong, and now I'm kind of like, all right, cool. I guess we can trust that if something crazy like this happens again, no one's going to be playing League of Legends at 2 o'clock in the morning when they were supposed to play at like 5 6 p.m. So that's good.
Yeah. Look, I think that this issue, we'll have to see if it resolves itself. Like, obviously, they're very aware of it now. So I would assume that if it was some sort of DDoS, they will be able to, change their IP and fix their network security protocols in a way that will make this very difficult, if not impossible, moving forward. But we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. All right. Before we talk about how absolutely fraudulent KT is, Wolf, I do want to get your sense on something because I've been getting asked this a lot. What do you think about Keria's response to the Ezreal pick and like the fan criticism surrounding it? Because what have you been seeing? It seems very weird that this has become such a big issue when he picked Ezreal and it was fine. Like, it's obviously not great, but he still was able to perform extremely well on it. And why is he getting this backlash, and what has been his response to it?
So I haven't really seen his response to it per se that much, but I can tell you guys that the culture around moves like this in Korea is very different, and we've talked about this on the show before. For example, when Hirai decided to play the Challenger squad,
Right.
and win that way, and it's basically like in a way saying like I want to give these Challengers players stage experience, and we're gonna try to train them up, and it's an easier matchup for us, and blah blah blah. And a lot of people saw that move as extremely disrespectful to Live Sandbox because they were like, well, this is you should just play a standard match and play professionally and do like the sportsman-like thing, which is to just play a normal game and smash them. But sometimes teams will do something a little bit odd or unusual, right? In esports in general, when you're going to win. Or like, for example, sometimes it's a game that doesn't mean anything. Like if it's a regular season game where both teams,
Right.
their playoffs and standings are already determined. I mean, a lot of people probably don't remember Naniwa pro brushing Nestea in StarCraft 2 because the game literally didn't have any implications, and everyone was super hyped to see these two players play against each other. And then Naniwa just boxed his probes and sent them across the map because he didn't want to play the match, which is a very childish thing to do, right? And it made a lot of people very angry. But these types of things, like for example, picking Ezreal is a really weird pick, and it's not strong, and it felt like he was trolling and basically just trying to dunk on his opponent there. A lot of Korean fans don't like that. They think it's unsportsmanlike, and I think a lot of people think that that type of move shouldn't be championed. Is the kind of like, okay, T1 is so good they could like pick Teemo mid and probably still win. Is like not something people want to champion. And my take on this is like he had a interesting build. Like he went Horizon focus. It was kind of okay, and Ezreal was very strong on that patch, and I don't think this was as trolly or like unsportsmanlike as people would would make you believe. And frankly, he can do whatever he wants. Like he has that power because his team is that strong, and he has that like he has that freedom. I think he's earned that freedom. But I I think this is an issue that Western fans don't always understand because it's a very Korean mindset, the sportsmanship type concept about these types of things where a lot of people in the West would be like, I'd love to see Faker play Teemo actually, and even though it doesn't make sense, he totally destroys those guys. Whereas Korean fans don't really like um, that kind of showboating, which is partially why you also see in interviews very rarely players, just shitting on the other team or actually like being like Western players being like, "Well, I was way better than him," or actually like really really being aggro. There's a lot of times we have these interviews where the host puts up like like a solo kill that happens, and then the Korean player gets like really uncomfortable because the truth is like so Keen, like you actually killed him under tower here, like what happened? And like it's very obviously a huge misplay from the other player who like totally messed it up, and then like Keen gets a kill, and Keen's just like, well, I think I got lucky. Actually, I got lucky there. Yeah, I'm like that's as far as he's gonna
So
say.
let me explain a different phenomenon to you guys, and this says a lot about Korean culture. Is it's not that you can't showboat, okay? Such as Wolf's example about Keen. It's that you can't acknowledge that you're showboating. So if you want a great example of this, so if you guys are baseball fans, you'll know that bat flipping in Major League Baseball in America is considered extremely bad form. Like if you hit a home run and you toss your bat in the air and it flips around afterwards in a very ostentatious way, what happens is the pitchers literally just start throwing balls directly at you. Like the vengeance that will be wreaked upon you by the other team, even if it costs them like walks or other penalties, like you're just going to get the shit kicked out of you. Might start a fight, like you just don't know. Now, in Korean baseball, so in the KBO, and actually early in her career, Mina Kimes wrote a very good article for ESPN, the magazine, about bat flipping in the KBO. And what's hilarious is if you listen to these interviews, so in Korean baseball, bat flipping happens all the time. Like players have their signature styles of bat flips, like it's a ceremony. But when she asked them about bat flipping, they all pretended not to know that it was being done. So literally, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like when they are throwing their bat like 20 feet into the air, like they clearly are very intentionally doing this, but you pretend like you're not doing it. And this is like the core of Korean culture. If something bad but entertaining is happening, it's allowed to happen, but you are not allowed to talk about it. Right, Wolf?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the bat phenomena. I actually I was gonna bring that up as well, but you brought it up first. That's a great article. That the one that you mentioned by Mina Kimes. You guys should Google this and read it. It's
Well,
really
we'll include it in the description below.
yeah. But yeah, it is definitely a lack of acknowledgement. I think, like you say, is really the truth of it, because you can say something subtle, but it can't be too aggressive. You can pick Ezreal support, but you can't say like this is a free win, lol. Um, you can't. That's why every single time we have the interview, where our interview structure is very rigid at the LCK, and the last question is always your next opponent is X. How are you going to prepare for that? And even if it's like T1 is like your next opponent is Brion, and they haven't won any games, how are you going to prepare for that? Nobody goes like, oh, we're not even like thinking about that match. We're thinking about the other match during the week actually, and Bros is free low. I'm gonna pick support Ezreal. Nobody's gonna say that, but they will maybe pick support Ezreal and have fun. And like I think this type of like esports phenomena, because it is different from like traditional sports, and it is like a very international thing, because even though you have the Korean fans, like you have tons of fans in China, you have tons of fans in the US, Australia, Europe, etc. I think this might change eventually. And you could see in esports where it's way more popular outside of Korea than it is in Korea, that Korean players will do a little bit of showboating. Like the
I mean,
Overwatch
look
League
at
is a great
MC.
example. Yeah.
Look at MC and
MC.
StarCraft as well,
Yeah.
because like you have to remember, StarCraft 2 was vastly more popular outside of Korea than it was inside Korea in terms of number of fans. So you got to see this, especially when these players would go to like MLGs, right, Wolf?
Yeah, and also, Overwatch League, you saw a lot of Korean players, do a lot of funny stuff and get pretty aggressive at times, because, I mean, Overwatch in general had more viewers outside of Korea than did in Korea, even though it was still big in Korea for a really long time. But they were also, playing on stage and doing interviews on stage in front of a Western audience, so the expectation was very different. So, um, I think that it's a little bit overblown, but if you know how Korean fans are going to react, which every Korean player does and every coach knows, and you decide to pick support Ezreal, you're going to have to live with it. You're going to have to live with
Yep.
it. It's like, when a lot of Korean players, I won't name any names, who boosted in Overwatch, for example, and found out later that, or they got caught, and they were like, well, I just didn't know it was a bad thing. I'm just going to have to call major BS on that, because it was the biggest issue of all time during that time. Whether if you boost, you are the devil. It is evil. You got to be aware of what the fans think, and if you're going to pick support Ezreal, you're going to lock that in. You're going to know that some people are not going to be happy with that, and that's kind of my final say.
Wolf, I pulled up the Mina Kimes article. It's called what is it?
The
The
great bat
Art
of
of Letting Go. It's called The Art of Letting Go. And she, here's a sample of an interview that she does with, and remember, she's half Korean herself. So when she talks to a batter named Choi Jun Suk, she asks him the following question: do you do anything special for your fans? Response: no. What does it feel like when you flip your bat? I'm not doing it on purpose, so I don't have any feeling. Are you aware that people overseas enjoy your flips? I'm not. Like, so it's so absurd. I like how he just says, I'm not flipping my bat on purpose, as if every single time the bat just magically flies out of his hands in exactly the same way with his own signature flip style. It's so ridiculous. And yet, for some reason, major other baseball players are able to hold on to their bats after they complete a hit. It's weird, right? They just like butter up those bats in Korea. It's amazing.
It, like it is what it is, and I think a lot of Korean culture will change and adapt, over the next 5-10 years about this type of thing. Like I said, in esports especially, as it's a very international thing. You have viewers all over the world, but uh, I do think that you gotta know, like I said, my real final thoughts on this is like you gotta know that if you do this behavior, that some people aren't gonna like it, and then you're gonna have to live with it. If you want to be the guy who goes against the grind and who goes against the Korean mentality of like don't acknowledge the bat flip, then you can be that guy, but there's gonna be pushback on you. So like Keria gets to play like Caitlyn support when it's good and when it's strong, and that's fine. But if he plays
I
Ezreal
just don't
support,
understand
it's
where the
never good.
line is, Wolf. It's like he could play Jhin support, but Ezreal, that is if he plays Ezreal support and does the most damage in the whole fucking game, that's the line, Wolf. He's not. That's illegal. That's an illegal Ezreal. I don't understand. It's like the strange thing is it's like it's not even so it's not even so outside of his norm, right? He is the guy who plays AD carries from the support position. So why is this one crossing the line? That's what confused me.
I just think everybody thinks Ezreal support sucks. It's not good. And like I said last time when we talked about this, I was like, I don't think we'll ever see this pick again.
I mean, it worked because they were much better than their opponents,
Yes.
but yeah.
I mean,
All
any
right.
support that you hard stomp with, if you hard stomp hard enough, like will actually be viable. So
Sure. That's a true statement. That's a true statement. Um, so guys, it's time for us to revel, or in some cases, if you're Wolf, apologize for being wrong about KT being wrong.
so look,
Which Wolf, I have to admit, I did not think that the reckoning would come so quickly.
I think
If
it's
I'm being
time.
honest.
I think it's time for KT to change their nickname back to their old original first Brood War nickname, KTF, which stands for KT's fraudulent, because they were fraudulent this week, Monty. And you know what? You were right. And I even gave you a shout out on the desk when they got
I
absolutely
know.
obliterated because they were extremely found out. They were exposed on the highest level. Um, and you know what? I guess when they beat Genji, it was just because they got Senna twice, and Senna is so broken, and Genji didn't have the answer because every team thinks they have the answer to Senna, but they do not. That's why they won, because they got Senna 2 games in a row.
Also, Canyon playing Jin Zhao and Jarvan. They had switched up their style, and yeah, we've seen some Lee Sin games from Genji since, but that game was also just so low quality in general. Like Genji was hard throwing a lot of times. So was KT, and KT was the one who ended up catching the wins at the end. But we thought, Wolf, that it was going to be safe, even with KT as an underdog, to like put our money on esports bet on KT versus Hanwha Life. Mistakes were made. I thought that perhaps BDD would be able just to clown on Zeka. But you know what? Of course, Zeka had to go back to playing his Yone and, doing things that made sense for him instead of playing Corki this week. So, of course, that had to happen. Number one. Of course, we have to see Pyosik completely being terrible. Of course, we have to see the very questionable Senna Ash lane, which, by the way, what was successfully ran by Top Esports. It's an LPL thing that I guess they've kind of brought over. I have never been impressed with it, even within the wins that this composition has had. And they get dunked on by Viper on Jhin. Like they give Delight Rakan 2 games in a row. Delight has some massive games. It felt like for Hanwha, everything was going back to what made them good originally. Like these are the classic champs: Delight, Rakan, Yone, or melee mid laners for Zeka, where he's popping off, right?
So,
Peanut on Sejuani and Maokai, where he gets to control the pace of the engage of the team and be the frontline tank.
I mean, the first game, where the first Hanwha game where they had, I'm just looking at the draft to make sure that I have everything remembered. Yeah, they went for the Alistair pick with Deft, which has been a kind of classic with Smolder recently. They went that route, and Deft had a ton of stacks. He was extremely big. He was super fed, and I remember they had like the game. It wasn't like they were hard winning, but they had the game in a pretty good game state. Smolders, he scaled up. He's got his his third evolution of his Q. He's stacking that really hard. Um, And I didn't really like it. We've seen a lot of different builds of Smolder. I didn't really like Deft to build that much in that game. But anyway, um, there's a team fight on Baron that I remember where everybody just kind of walks in and on top of it, like all together on top of Delight's Recon ult. And that's the first fight that Life wins in the late game that's super decisive, and they gain Baron off of that, and they gain a ton of map control off of that. And then it's just really hard for KT to come back after that against the super fed Yone. And um, they just didn't have the range either. Like Smolder's weakness is low range. Like you can Q people, but only if you're winning the fight. Because if you get into Q range on top of a Yone, for example, you better hope that like he's CC'd or the fight is already kind of so in your favor. You can just keep pressing Q on cooldown and execute people. But if you're kind of trying to win a poke war with your W that does literally less than 0 damage against Varus, um, you need engage. You need some sort of tool to get on top of him. But they kind of just were super sloppy, and that game was super disappointing to me because I thought they had a decent draft. I thought they had their win conditions set, and then they kind of just walked into a like manhole and fell down like very comically. Like that's like
Well,
what it felt like to me.
I mean, there were several issues. Like it just the execution of this comp was so wacky as well. Because, for example, Pyosik kept Vi ulting Sejuani, like especially after Sejuani had used Sejuani ult, which like didn't make any sense. So they were using critical cooldowns on like frontliners who had already used cooldowns themselves. On top of that, Wolf, like Perfect was completely fucking useless on this Aatrox. Like actually did nothing. Zero people built any kind of tankiness in this composition, while we have this incredibly fed lethality Varus who is doing obscene amounts of damage. Like Viper is absolutely popping off this game. And they can't sustain any of the poke. So even though you have depth on like 400, 500 stacks, it's a 55-minute game because they don't have a front line. They actually just can't snowball this game. And they continuously make mistakes where instead of peeling for deft, they're like violting a Sejuani and then losing the fight.
Yeah, exactly. And like Viper, I think he ended up even getting POG that game, but he played extremely well. His spacing was good, and this is what I'm saying. If you don't have engage and your front line is an Aatrox that has like plated steel caps as his only tanky stat, if he gets hit by a Varus combo as well as he's trying to push through the front line that actually does exist and there's a Yone there, he just dies and he can't actually get to the Varus. So you have to be winning so hard that you have total map control. They have to come to you. Like it has to be that the enemy team has to force their way, and Peanut needs to be like coming in and looking for and fishing for ults or trying to flank a Smolder, and then maybe a flanking recon. That kind of stuff has to happen, and then you can win those fights front to back, even though you don't have a great front line because you're the one who's dictating the pace of turning a Baron, for example. But once they lost that fight on Baron, there was just no way back in. And you could keep Smolder W and keep getting more stacks, but it's not going to change the fact it's not going to give you suddenly Smolder's Q range is going to double, and then he's going to be able to Q Varus and poke him out. It's just not going to happen. I was hoping that Deft would have built Leandries in this game. We've seen a lot of Smolder
Yes.
build Leandries and just kind of slowly burn them at least so that you can offer some sort of poke back with the W and the ultimate from Smolder. He didn't do it. I think KT were pretty woefully unprepared for this composition that they ran. And they got punished, and I think that was the first worry. The second game was just not even a game. Like the Jin game you referenced was like not even a game of League of Legends. And the Ashe Sivir is fine with me. Like I'm not a huge fan of it, but I think what it can do in lane is quite strong. And BDD Talia I normally trust. But they just took a bunch of dumb fights and skirmishes and lost the game like around red buff, and then like did it again, and then they like did it again. And I was like, okay, well this game is just over. Like it's not even a professional game of League of Legends. And I did not think. I mean, I even though last week I made the case that KT was not fraudulent, I did not think KT was going to get bodied by Hano. I did not think Hano was going to actually make them look like an East Side team. But in game 2, that's what they did.
Yeah. Look. I think the Sivir Ashe composition can work. People just have to remember that Sivir, while great in terms of team fighting, also can be played in pick comps. And T1 did that a lot like in the last couple of years with Sivir. When they play Sivir, it's not about Sivir team fighting. It's about Sivir collapsing onto a flank or using speed to catch out somebody in the side lane. And that's what this composition, particularly with Ashe and Talia, is, right? It's about getting somebody on their own and killing them quickly. And they didn't do that. Like, they're playing this composition not as a pick comp. And if you are not going to do that, you actually just don't have the ability to fight against, the Yone and the Maokai in a front to back. Like, your back line is going to get destroyed. Um, you're going to receive a bunch of poke from the Jhin in this case, or you're going to get engaged on because Sivir is still relatively low range by a Rakan or a Maokai or a Yone. And so you have to play for picks, and they weren't doing that, which meant that this composition just doesn't function.
Yeah. I think the like the drafts we saw from KT were very unlike them in that they were really thinking very much outside of the box. I think KT generally plays their own style and the style they've mastered. And even that was true very much so last year. And so far this season has mostly been true. Like, we're not seeing too many like super strange or weird picks from them. Nico being disabled also kind of hurts them because BDD is a really good Nico player. It's often banned against him, and I think that was another play style that BDD and Pioshik really liked, is just play Nico and then hard engage and play dive. They didn't have that opportunity because they, it's disabled or was disabled last week. So they really thought too far outside of the box on that Sivir composition, and like BD is still playing Talia, but they didn't dominate the lane because the idea is like you dominate the lane, Talia gets some level of control in Weaver's Wall down to the bottom lane. You set up some really nice picks down there. You can Ash Arrow into like Talia flip and kill people, and Sivir gets super ahead. The Jhin just becomes irrelevant. Like, I get the idea behind the draft, but the execution and the hard forcing without control, the hard forcing when there is a Yone on the other team and you don't have that level of control in mid lane with the Talia that you can in a lot of other matchups, like that he often has against Azir, for example. You could force those things to happen, but they were just so disjointed, and it felt very much like a scrim that went wrong. And I think that one other thing that became very evident was KT played very emotionally, I feel like, in this series. After that first team fight on Baron, made a lot of mistakes after that, and then came into the second game just extremely disheartened and very sloppy. I think for a team that has 3/5 of the DRX 2022 World Championship roster that dealt with a ton of adversity and a ton of craziness, like the inhibitor respawning on Deft and stuff like that, um, it's a little bit surprising to see that they seem very much distraught after a loss like that. And we'll see if they can turn it around. But I thought maybe we were like, I was so high on KT, I thought maybe we were living in a world where they're on top 3 trajectory. Like, this team might end up being like the second best team in the LCK if they can continue to improve. No, I'm not feeling like that way at all right now. Not even close. I'm on the fraud train too. I'm not a believer. I'm sorry everyone for being a believer.
This is where they of course they will get good again, Wolf. Let's talk also about the telecom war, because I'll be honest, Wolf, I thought they were going to take a game off of this one. I thought they were going to take a game. And instead they just got completely stomped in both games.
Well, they did give Senna over to T1. Not sure why they did that. Not sure. I think that's a bad plan.
I mean, what I think about their compositions is that in game 1 they just played to win lane and then win game. When they didn't win lane and then win game, then if they don't win lane, then they don't win game. Like, they gave up second Drake. I love how they try and pinch Faker's champion pool by, you see the Azir ban versus BDD. Okay, they ban Ori, then they ban Hui, and you take the Karma away and Nico's disabled. But guess what's still there, Wolf? What's still there?
It's Corki.
Oh, it's Corki. And Corki has the package. And so it's second Drake, when you're trying to win lane and stack Drakes with Callista, he just comes in, wins the team fight, and there you go. Like, then you can't stack the Drakes. You actually, and I hate that teams are doing this, Wolf. They actually just run a composition without any form of primary engage besides throwing Renata Glask at their face with Callista ult.
No, Flash Callista ult. It's totally viable. Monty, come on. Handshake
I
exists.
they run a composition that is incredibly low range outside of Karma Poke. It's like low range Callista, Renata Glask, Xin Zhao, and Udyr with some Karma Poke, and they try and play it into a mid to late game Corki and Senna. Like if you do not smash lane and win off of Drake stacks, you just straight lose this game. You have no way to engage. You have no way to deal damage. You get poked out. You get out sustained by Senna, and that's what happened. And when you also have a farming Nautilus who's going to get incredibly tanky, where is the damage, Wolf, with this composition? Where is it? Who
It's
is supposed to be doing damage?
BDD, I guess, but like the concept of this draft for me is like, okay, if you win every Drake fight or you force T1 to avoid the Drakes, right? And if you win lane super hard, which they initially did, especially in mid lane and top lane, because there's nothing a Corki can do against a Karma on this patch. It's just not going to happen. Perfect was able to successfully like proxy minions behind the turret. He was
Yep,
winning the lane super hard. First dragon went well. Second dragon botched it. Herald completely botched it. Game's over. And you make
yep,
one mistake with this comp, and it's
yep.
100% over. It's it's one of those all-in types of comp
Yes,
where you have to be winning all the time. And KT is very good at snowballing these types of games, and they've done it multiple
sure.
times this season. It's what they did to Dplus actually in the first week of play.
And look, I don't like this composition, but I don't mind you running it in the first game of a best of 3
Yeah,
if you have another plan. Like it's a gamble that you're taking, right?
impressive.
You
Yeah, it's oppressive and it's frustrating to play against. And if you lose a game like this as T1, it's very disheartening. Then that could warp your draft for the best of 3. Like I'm totally with you. Game 1, go for this. But the execution wasn't good enough to make me trust that they had planned this out well enough. And just this style of composition into Senna has failed so many times against the good teams. Like they almost never lose to this. So it felt like they were really trying to hard force something that just wasn't likely to succeed. Like just ban the Senna. They did in game 2, and we had another story there. But
the thing is, well, I liked their KT's draft in game 2. I liked it. I really liked what KT was pulling out. Sure, you give up the Orianna to Faker. He's been super good, but you get the Azir on BDD, one of his signature champions, right? You get Varus onto Deft, and you get the counter pick. And Perfect has been very good in the Gnar matchup into Cassante this season. Like, as it's been his best matchup, I think we can say. As a rookie. And you pick the Wukong. Not a common pick right now, but you need threat onto Smolder, right? So you actually have backline dive versus the Smolder. I was hyped, man. I was like, they've got all the answers. I think they can pull this off. And then what do? They immediately invade the jungle at like level 3. Like we see Def take an incredibly terrible trade in the bot lane where he sees Keria hit level 2 on Alistair. He stands there charging his Q and then just gets punted into a turret, loses entire health. And then on top of that, Bioshik's like, well, my Varus doesn't have an HP bar anymore. Should I walk into enemy jungle and try and fight them? Oh, I'm dead and I got everybody killed and the game is over.
Barrel is also like, I'm also going to go in with Pioshik. And then Smolder just flaps around and blows up depths. Or like I say blows up. He like in Smolder in the early levels when you press E and he does like his like little damage numbers pop up and it's like 4 damage, 4 damage, 4
Yeah.
damage. Like it's like he just doesn't hurt you actually at all. It's so funny. Like and then he actually is able to kill a Varus because of the whole disaster. So Smolder is accelerated. The game is done. Like I didn't like the draft that much for KT because I think it's not a draft that suits their play style. And I think like Wukong on paper, in theory, yeah, he should be able to get on top of a Smolder, but you're dealing with an Alistair, you're dealing with Faker's Orianna, and they got Vi into your Varus. So I feel like you gave T1 a comp that allows for not only scaling but also aggressive outplays, and it's just going to be super volatile. And T1 thrives in these volatile games because they're so good at reading game states. They're so good at turning, what looks like a 5v3 fight into a horrible fight where actually it's a really good TP angle or Faker survives long enough, so much damage is done, and he dies, but then T1 show up and KT's at half health. You know, these types of skirmishes and fights that Smolder can actually be quite good at because it allows him to constantly stack out of the team fights, the skirmishes that are happening, and you have to kind of opt into this type of aggression with the Wukong. Um, it just feels like you're asking for another game, just like game one, where you have to dominate the whole time, no mistakes, not even one error can happen, or you lose. And then they very aggressively made the errors that we talked about in the bottom lane. And
Oh, I mean, I can't. Deft just played horribly this game. Like he didn't. It's like he didn't know what Alistair did a lot of the time. He refused to flash Alistair engages even when Keria was coming right at him. He wasn't respecting Alistair ranges. It was really sad to watch Deft play.
yeah, I don't know what was up with that. Like I said earlier when we were talking about the Hanwha series, KT just seem a little emotionally invested in these games. Like the gameplay we're seeing after game one losses in game two is in both series is just very disheartening, and it's not the level of play that we know. Even when you thought they were fraudulent, we were going to see. Last week, like we're just not seeing Deft's best, and we know he knows what Alistair does, and we know that he can flash those because he's Deft and he's one of the most accomplished AD carries of all time, and yet he does not. So I don't know what it means. I don't know what's going on within the team. Um, but my read is that this team is kind of getting emotional, getting tilted after these losses and just not playing their best in these game twos. And that was one of the fun things about KT in Telecom Wars over the last few is that it's actually, KT keeps it together. They come in strong, they come in with a good plan, and they bring us to 3, even if they don't win it, right? And
Yep.
um, it was pretty disappointing Saturday showdown, to be honest.
Yeah. T1 still looks very confident and poised though. I mean, they are the team to beat at this juncture, right? Like I think they looked good in both of these games.
Yeah, I think right now that they're better than Gen.G. I think they're the
Yep.
strongest team in the LCK, and they have shown us some of those, like, happy games, as we like to call them, so a little bit of Ezreal support, but they have also shown us just really good drafting and not a whole lot of holes are exposed. Last summer, Faker's champion pool actually at that moment in time seemed really tiny, and we were like, okay, well, there's a clear weakness here. It's very exploitable. I don't
Right.
feel like there's a very big weakness on this roster at all at this moment in time. Whereas I feel like on Gen.G, there definitely seem to be some issues with Canyon's champion pool and how they want to play around him. There seem to be some issues with how Pays and Lehens are playing together. It's not like
Yeah.
glaring weakness. It's not like I'm not saying Gen.G is a bad team by any means, but I think that T1 just looked that 10% cleaner, that 10% more the full package. And so, as we hit the midway point of the season this week, I'm leaning towards T1 is going to be the one that ends up winning regular season. As we knew it was very likely, but I feel like now it's kind of like, but before it was like, oh, but maybe Gen.G could beat them, in that second Gen.G T1 match. Now I'm feeling like T1 will probably crush them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, we still have a few more weeks to go, a few more patches to go, so we'll see. I mean, like honestly, the if Zeri is gonna like return to the meta as the handshake matchup with Smolder or with Senna, um, that might be a little bit concerning for T1 because Guma's never been that good of a Zeri player, especially compared to some other players in this league, like Aiming um or Pays, right, who have been like major Zeri players within the LCK. So that might be a little bit concerning, but I imagine they'll probably just rein Zeri in as time goes on.
Yeah, I also think that T1, even in Zeri metas, yeah, Guma didn't play it very often. He wasn't very good at it. I mean, compared to the elite Zeri players in the league,
Right.
um, they still were able to find wins against it and ban it and do other stuff. So, and by now, maybe he's improved on the champion because it's been a long
Sure.
time and it's been pretty
His
relevant.
more recent Zeri games were a lot better, but it was kind of at the tail end of that Zeri meta.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Kwangdong giving up their first win to Breon? Because that was a bit of a surprise, because I thought Breon might actually achieve the 018 Dream Wolf.
I mean, everybody thought it was going to be. I mean, at least on our side, like on the English side, we all thought definitely it's going to be the winless season. Like we were already kind of like, I guess this is it. Like I guess this is happening. And
But
then
then Smolder was released, which allows bad teams to win games.
I guess so. That game, I had to pull up the draft. I couldn't remember if it was game 2 or game 3. The final game, the Smolder versus Ezreal game, that was not LCK level League of Legends on either side. That game was just not that was not it. That was not a high level game of League of Legends. I think Kwangdong in general is a team that it definitely feels like CV Max is pulling the strings. Like I feel like he's got his like marionette type like setup where you can see he's like up at the top. He's a puppet master. And then sometimes like the strings get a little bit tied, and I feel like the players don't know what he's trying to tell them to do. Like they're not really sure what the draft is supposed to do.
He's developing players, Wolf. Like, sometimes you have to go with Garen or like I like the Seraphine pick, to be fair. I like the Seraphine pick a lot into this Molder.
Oh, sure. And I think that is like that's okay. It's that game also was like the game where Karis was like Rise ulting on top of himself. Forgot about that.
Where's Poolbay, Wolf? I was told that Poolbay was joining this roster.
So Poolbay has joined this roster, and it's really funny because he joined right after we did the show last week. It was like announced like an hour later or something. He's pretty good. I will warn people that Poolbay was really hyped when he was in his like first years on Dplus when they were doing really well in challengers, and people were like, "Oh, this guy's really good." But then he fell off pretty hard, and I would tell you guys that he is significantly weaker of a player than like Thanatos and Lucid, who were the two like other players on Dplus that everyone was really excited for. So he's good, like, but don't get me wrong, he's not like the next rookie who's going to change the world. And bro got him. Is he better than Karis? I think so. But then Karis had a pretty good game earlier in the week, so they didn't actually have him. So he was this game, the Kwangdong game was still in round 1, I believe. I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm like trying to see if I remember this right. I need to open up the schedule. Yeah, it was the last game of round 1. So he wasn't eligible for the first Kwangdong one. And as far as I know, he was not on the original starting roster for the scheduled match 50 that was postponed. So I don't know if he'll be playing, but he wasn't eligible to play in this match. The one that we're talking about, the first Kwangdong series. The second one hasn't happened yet. I think he will play eventually, but I know he wasn't, or at least on the original iteration of the match, supposed to be starting. So I don't know what that means about what Bro is doing with their lineup. We'll find out next week, or maybe even sooner, depending on what happens with the replay of the match. But this series, to me, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Bro, good enough to be 9th place in the LCK." I'm like, well,
No.
hold on. Like,
look, I hated that last draft that we saw from Kwangdong, because there was, unlike the previous game, right, where you have a Lee Sin who can get into the backline onto the Smolder, where you have long range damage that can go over the entire team. Like you can Senna ult, or you can Seraphine ult in order to get the Smolder into the backline. Like you could dive back there with Poppy. There was just no threat onto this Smolder. And like watching this game, how the fuck are they ever supposed to kill this Smolder, Wolf? Like he literally just has a tank line of Nautilus and Sejuani in front of him, and sure, Bulk can poke a little bit, but there's no actual thing that prevents him from free firing onto your front line. And by the time we reach the late game, 40 minutes into this game, it's you really see the struggles of Kwangdong as they're trying to like figure out how to kill this guy, and they just can't do it. Like they can't put damage onto the smolder, so he just procs Q across everybody and blows them up.
It's kind of reminiscent to some of the drafts we talked about earlier, with the telecom war, where you need to win super hard early, and the Karma Ezreal lane needs to be
Yes,
setting up for
dominate.
dives. You need the Talia to come down. Like you need to dominate so hard that Talia can Weaver's wall down, and Maokai can just press R towards the
Yep.
bottom turret,
It's
and
it's
Smolder can
also easy to execute, Wolf. Like
yeah.
here's the thing. Yes, it requires snowballing, like you're saying, but how fucking hard is it to dive this smolder when you have Talia wall? Oh, what about diving with Karma Ezreal? What, you have Karma shields, you have Karma speed, you have Ezreal E to get out. You have, as you say, Wolf, Maokai
Maokai
R
can
just
just
to
press
ult the
R.
turret.
Yeah.
Like
They
this
should
is
have been
it's
able to
actually just the easiest dive composition of all time.
They should have been able to put the Smolder down 40, 50 CS and deny him farm and deny him stack farm, right? And grab plate gold. No, they didn't do it. And like that's why I'm saying like the strings got disconnected because CV Max put a draft together that should be absolutely pilotable. Should be, especially considering you're by far the stronger team. Like you should absolutely be able to punish the Smolder. I don't think this is a necessarily draft problem. But the draft has problems if you do not do those things, right? If you do not do those things, the issues you described become a problem. You can't kill the Smolder. You have to snowball it. You have to make him not a champion. You have to make him a paperweight. Otherwise, he is going to grow into the late game powerhouse that he is designed to be. And he, even with his mediocre escape, like will be fine against this comp. You won't be able to kill him because you don't have a reliable way to lock him down. Maokai ult is your best bet, and there's just too many people who can block for him, so he's gonna
Yeah,
be fine.
exactly.
He's gonna be fine. So that's if you there's so many teams in the LCK right now who have a draft that can work, and the coaching staff clearly knows how to do it. Well, the players boot into the game and they're like, even like we've seen Smolder teams go, we're the scaling comp. So I guess we need to force this fight on Dragon right now. We don't have vision. I'm like, no, you need to just farm. That's what your comp is supposed to do. And I feel like there's definitely either players are ignoring their coach's wisdom or there's like weak coaching going on this season of LCK where no one is really telling the players how they need to play out the comps they're being given.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's depressing to watch. I mean, I also think though that the coaches shouldn't be doing this, for teams like KT or teams like Guangdong, because really, especially Guangdong, their laning phase has not been the best. If we're being honest, like especially Bulldogs laning phase has not been great. Where they've really been shining is in like mid and late game macro decision making. So why are we doing these comps that require them to force super hard in the laning phase? Now, maybe CV Max, thought this was a great time to practice this because it's against Breon and they need to get better at this. That's totally a legitimate take that you could have.
Yeah.
And I think that CV Max does experiment a lot to teach players lessons. And in a way, I would rather see him do this versus the worst teams because that's where the players can grow. And what we want is for Guangdong to be a kind of legitimate playoff team. And like the way you get there is not by running the same shit over and over and over again. It's by developing your players' skill sets over time. Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, like, this style of composition, Wolf, requires the youngest players on this team to have to do this. Like they have to execute through mid and bot lane, which is not where the veterans are. And certainly Cuz can be helping by calling this out, but the rest of his team has to set him up for success. It is easier for this team objectively to play through Doo right now than it is to play through their mid and bot lane. And like this required significant mid bot lane synergy with the Talia and the dives to work out, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't.
It didn't. And like I hope they learn how to pilot drafts like this because they should be able to, and it is, as we said many times, very basic, but um my issue is with these types of comps, the same thing with the KT stuff is it narrows your win conditions so heavily that and a lot of teams are just more reliant on good late game team fighting and playing on even
Yeah.
footing. The meta hasn't been like that for a really long time where we just kind of sit back and farm and you have two scaling 80 carries bot and everybody just tries to make plays around dragons, and otherwise like don't interact, don't dive, don't hard force. Um, and I think Kwangdong is a team that thrives in that type of meta more because they're a little bit more of a slow and steady wins the race. Bulldog wants to scale up on a Corki or on a Hui and do damage later on. But if you want to, improve your like repertoire of champions and you want to actually grow your skill set, you will have to play these games sometimes. But now you lost a game to Bro because you couldn't do it, and so there are heavy consequences for them. And I still think they're way better than Bro. I still think this was a fluke. I think it was weird. But maybe it's going to come as a good wake up call for Kwangdong because, as we've discussed a lot here, Kwangdong is the team that, at least for me, is the most exciting team in the LCK right now because there
Yes.
have been such clear improvements. Like this team is actually on an upwards trajectory,
Yeah.
and their playstyle is unique. I love this team, and I want them to be successful. So I'm hoping this is a good wake up call for them.
I think it will be. And plus they have another game, whenever it gets rescheduled versus Brion, right? So I think that they will definitely bounce back from this. And I'd rather have them kind of deal with this at this point in time and grow. Because they've got a very tough match. They're starting out with Genji. It's our first match this week on Wednesday. So, this week's going to be a lot harder. And hopefully they've learned enough to like put up a competitive match against Genji.
Yeah, and they have that rescheduled Bro match as well. So they have
Yeah.
that who knows when that's going to happen. That's probably adding some additional stress, and then yeah, they have that tough Genji match. The last time they played against Genji, they played a pretty close first game against Genji, which was really exciting. And then they I want to say beat them at the end of the season in summer as well. Last time, kind of randomly, they have played some weird good games against Genji historically. So that one is one that I'm looking forward to a lot. And then they face off against Nongshim, so kind of a lopsided week in that way, like very front heavy. They should be able to beat Nongshim if they drop to after dropping to Bro. There is a world where, for example, they lose to Bro again because of the rescheduled match, then lose to Genji, and then if they lose to Nongshim, I'm like, oh no, it's the mid-season Kwangdong collapse. I've seen it before. I don't want
No,
it.
look, they actually have such a big advantage already, Wolf. Like we expect them to beat Brion again, which will put them at 6-4 overall. I mean, they could have been 7-3, which is like really crazy. Like they could have just been fourth place if they had just beaten Brion twice. Um, but as it stands right now, like Kwangdong's in a pretty good position considering that FearX is the next team out of the playoffs and they're 3-7. So Kwangdong is like almost certainly going to be a playoff team as long as they don't completely collapse.
Yeah, and I don't, we don't talk about them very much on this show because they haven't done very much interesting stuff. But like, I don't think FearX is going to
No,
suddenly get good. And I
no,
hate to say that actually about FearX. Like, we don't talk about. I feel like we don't talk about them on this show almost ever, just because they're so
they're the most boring team in
they're
this
the most
league,
boring.
Wolf.
They're the most boring team. You know that. You know what you're gonna get, which is disappointment. Like every time. You know how closer
Well,
plays.
it's just like there's not. Even though I actually think that Willer probably deserves to be on a better team,
Yes.
right? The problem is that there's nothing really exciting or unknown. Like with Brion, it's interesting how much they suck. Okay. With DRX, they've got some rookies on there that we can evaluate. With Nongshim, I think Nongshim's actually performing much better than FearX and like better than their results would show. Like if you just look at
Yeah.
Sylvie's had some really pop off games. Like they have hype moments. Huangnong is clearly exciting because they're actually beating other potential playoff teams and look like they're clearly improving. Dplus might suck, but they have legacy players who are world champions, so we talk about them. There is nothing going on at FearX. Nothing. There is nothing worth talking about. Nothing interesting. There is no upside. They're like better than some of these other teams, but they're never going to get better than they are right now. And that's just life, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just feel like FearX is a team that is we talk about all the time, like why isn't Thanatos playing, why didn't they call him up, like why are these rosters not utilizing some of the new talent in Korea, why are they sticking with some of the old guard and the old players, is if you put a roster together like what FearX has where you don't have any superstar famous player, no one even remembers your games, and like Clear was kind of hyped a little bit before he came onto the scene because of his challengers performances, which were pretty decent. But he is just not like he's still remained a challengers player. Like he's like Birdall. Like it's wild that like they went from Birdall to Clear, two players who have he's this new up and coming top laner, and then
I
totally
hate
bombed.
Clear so much. I think he's trash, man.
He's had a really rough season. And like he had some rough games in summer last year, but like nothing like this. So you have Clear, who's very weak right now. Willer, who's trying to hold the team together and saying nice very loudly every time something goes right, which is very rare. But if anything ever goes well for FearX, you hear him go nice on the post cam, and so I like that. I'm a big fan of that. Closer, who has shown, and I love the man, and he picks up a lot of POGs because he has to carry for this team to win, similarly to Showmaker. But he has, I feel like, shown out of all the mid laners we have. Okay, next to Karis. Okay, I'll put Karis one rung below him. Has shown the least career growth over like the last 4
It's
years.
crazy that
Like
this guy
it's
has not been
insane.
replaced by a rookie. Like his ceiling is so low, Wolf.
And then the bottom lane, it's Henna, man. And Henna actually was really quite good. Like I was actually kind of hyped about the Henna pickup at first when I saw this roster because I was like, oh, he's finally out of bro jail. And like uh and he's actually decent, like he's improved a little bit, but he's not an inspiring player that makes you feel like he's gonna be like the next big 80 carry. And I think part of that is because Execute is running it no matter what. Like, if it's a good thing or a bad thing, he is going in. And so Henna just can't even fucking play the game. He's like, well, I just want to like farm and like, catch a few waves and get my first item spike and go and Execute's like, no, we fight all the time, no matter what. And every story, he's like, whoa, 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 I just want to, I'm pretty good at late game. That's kind of my thing. I either play Kalista Varus in the early game, or I'm just a late game scaling guy. We don't need to force this fight, Execute. We don't need to flash on that guy, Execute.
I just love how he just flashes in the lane no matter what. Just tries to all in constantly. I mean, it's the only way they can win games. I actually don't even blame him. Like they're not going to win unless he does that.
But sometimes when he does it, it's just so silly, and I don't like it. And I don't think Hannah likes it either. But yeah, Execute's gonna do those silly plays. You know that Closer is going to make bad decisions against good players, and then maybe mechanically dunk on a bad player. And then Willer has to hold it all together somehow, where Clear gets counterpick on R5 and loses lane spectacularly, all at the same time. I feel bad for this team because none of the parts seem to, besides like Willer trying to one up everybody, none of the pieces feel like they're synergized together. Like if I'm Closer, I don't actually want to play with a bot lane that plays like this. If I'm Henna, I don't want to play with support that plays like this. If I'm Willer, I don't want to play with a top laner or a mid laner or a bottom or a support player who plays like this. But I gotta try.
It's not a very well constructed roster, is it, Wolf?
No, I'm not. I hope they make some changes. That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting at. I don't. Because people always ask like, why don't you guys talk about X Team on the show? So I was like, all right, I guess we'll do a little FearX talk this week.
Jeez. I mean, I think we're probably done with them, barring some sort of crazy upset win too for the season. Because like, what do you even say?
Yeah, not bad enough for us to meme them. Not good enough to be relevant in this conversation. You know what? We'll talk about them next time. No, I was gonna say next time a good team loses to them, and they're like the conversation of like, how did Dplus lose to? But I actually just don't think they're gonna beat any of them anymore. So
It is. I think their future is grim, Wolf. I think their future is grim. Okay. I guess we'll leave it there for this week. Games to watch this coming week, guys. Kwangdong versus Gen G, kicking things off, as we said. Might not be terrible. We've got Gen G versus KT. And we have, I actually am excited about Kwangdong versus Nongshim. actually want to watch that match because I think both those teams are better than their records show. So I'm kind of interested in that one. And we have KT, the Fraud Bowl, KT versus Dplus. Who is more fraudulent?
We talked about it already. I'm gonna say I think Dplus is more fraudulent, but like we're gonna find out for sure. I think that is a match you definitely do not want to miss. It is going to be very, very interesting. I think my
Hilarious.
expectation is that KT should stomp Dplus just from better play, especially in the early laning phases. Especially if KT draft like they do, where they just get pushing lanes, and limit Canyon's ability to. Or sorry, I don't know why I'm thinking it's Canyon still. On Dplus, limit Lucid's ability to plays like Canyon
Yep.
to actually have agency. And so that since that's my expectation, it'll probably be a 3-game slugfest that doesn't make any sense at all.
And KT will lose just to disappoint us once again, right? Just to throw our wagers into chaos.
I don't want to say it, but yeah, I mean, I can't predict that, but I
Well,
know that it is KT.
on Competitive Edge last week, I literally bet on every outcome of the T1 match that wasn't T1 2-0, and so I just lost everything.
KT always gets you. They always get you.
They found a way. They found a way to just not even win one. I just needed them, Wolf. I needed them either to win or to just win one game. I needed one of those things to happen, and they just lost all the games. So shout out to
You
KT.
really enjoyed game 2 then. I'm sure you really enjoyed game 2.
I did not enjoy game 2 because I was just like, why are you? I like your comp. Why are you fucking doing this, KT? Why? Why are we throwing the game?
And you were like, this pick is just never really working, and you had hope in your heart, and you were like, oh man, this draft from T1 is just a little bit all over the place. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Outrageous, Wolf. All right, guys. Thanks for watching the Monte and Wolf Show. We'll be back for more next week. See you then.